Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio at 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, December the 30th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. I'm just waking up, having some coffee, and made it to my show on time this morning, which is good. Yesterday I was running. I was actually late for my show and had to reschedule. So I'm glad to be here, and just want to look at another article I found on that mentalhealth.net, and we finished up with the article yesterday, Effects of Abuse, and by Catherine Petricelli, and so I want to continue looking at a couple more articles there, and then we'll just probably move on. But thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. You know, I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything. I just have or have any certificates in that area. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and for a year now, I've been doing Blog Talk Radio since last November, a year ago. So a little over a year. Wasn't sure how long I'd be doing it, and then wasn't sure who would be listening. And it's awesome to see, just how many people have been tuning into my shows and stuff. I really appreciate it, and hopefully it's helping somebody. I just wanted to be one more voice to speak out really to survivors, because I'm a survivor, and I thought, man, I know there's so many people out there who are suffering with this stuff, and it's hard. It's a hard road to walk, and it's hard to, especially when you're on your own, and you just feel like, wow, I'm the only, like I just feel so alone, and that's how I used to feel, and because I was not reaching out to people, and I was just sitting around in my own silence, really, about what had happened to me as a child. I did tell certain few people, right? I did tell people about what had happened, and growing up, people knew what happened to me. But as an adult, living 2,000 miles or over 2,000 miles away from where I was born, I didn't talk to too many people about it. But the odd person that I thought I could trust, and then it just turns out that I lost most of those friends, which is really unfortunate because, I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't think it was just the fact that I disclosed I was abused, but the whole issue is that it's hard to maintain friendships, especially when people, as an adult survivor, because a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. And especially when you tell them you've been abused, it's kind of like, I've actually, lost so many friends over the fact that as soon as I disclosed I was abused, and then they were just kind of like, oh, okay, well, I just don't want to deal with that. And it's like, well, okay, does that mean that I'm defective or what? But I think it's because people just think, oh, man, this person's going to be needy. But they were needy, too, in their own way, so it's almost like whatever. So then I stopped telling people about it. I really didn't talk to too many people about it, just kind of keeping it to myself, and really had no one to talk to and didn't reach out, and that's a horrible place to be. Because as soon as I started reaching out about really, mainly it's only been, I started on my healing journey 4 years ago, but I really didn't start reaching out for, I don't know, year and a half maybe? So it's been about a year and a half. And it's been great because as soon as I started reaching out to people, people started reaching out to me. And all these hands came back to me to say, look, you can do this. And I needed that. I needed that support, and because I wasn't getting that anywhere in my life except for my sweetheart, my good friend and sweetheart, who I'm still with after 15 years, So otherwise, I really didn't have any support, and of course not from my dysfunctional family. So that's why I'm doing this show, Otherwise, I wouldn't be bothered to do these shows. It's just because I think, so many people out there in the same boat, and sadly enough, there's so many people who have survived child abuse of all types, and it's horrible. And it's like, it's not that easy as people say, okay, how come you just can't get over it? Half the time it's because we have to deal with all these dysfunctional families because they're still around. And the family dynamics don't really change over time. For some people they might, but in my case it never did. And so the abuse reminders are there every day because I know that my family has the same exact feelings they did for me the day I was born. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, nothing's changed there. And, it's like, it's hard. It's really very hard. And even so, even if the dysfunctional family wasn't still in my life, I've got the memories and the flashbacks of what happened to me as a child that are, some days a little harder to take than others. And so there's a lot of, issues that surround this stuff for adult survivors. And that's why I wanted to do these shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion to all my shows, right? And it's clearly your choice and your decision to pay attention to what you're listening to. So if you think the show is going to bother you, then you have to turn it off. And it is your responsibility to be aware of what you can listen to and what you can't listen to. So all of my shows are talking about abuse, so they're very sensitive. So I would ask everybody to, make sure that you're okay listening to it. And if not, it's your responsibility to turn it off. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, because kids under the age of 18, I'm asking for you to be very, very careful and protect your own lives. You know what I mean? Like, you need to learn how to keep yourself safe online. And you need to learn that when there's a chat room present, you need to know that you've got to be extra careful, because there's a lot of sick people out there who will try to get a hold of children and sexually use them. So it's child sexual predators and pedophiles and whatnot. You have to be very, very careful what you're doing. Ask children under the age of 18 or young people under the age of 18 to have permission from an adult to listen to my show. Someone who is older who can help them make a decision whether they should listen to it or not, just because there's a lot of adult content and material on here. And I just believe in protecting children at all times. So there you go. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And we're fighting to save kids' lives. And if I could do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I would. Unfortunately, I can only do it as much as I can do it. I got to sleep and I have to eat. I also have to work, So unfortunately, I can only spend so many hours doing this. But I wish I could do this 24 hours a day, really, because it's so important to me. We got to save kids' lives, and a lot of people don't care about children. And a lot of people don't care about their children's lives, and that's the whole issue. And that's why, I know, right? My parents didn't care about their sons or their daughters. They just didn't care about their kids, right? So, I know how that is, and I know how that works. And so, I'm asking young people under the age of 18 to, have permission to listen to my show and learn how to keep yourself safe online, right? So we'll get right into this topic here, and I'm just going to go over to the page. I did pop the link into the chat room to this particular article that I want to look at from mentalhelp.net. And this is called Post-Abuse Vulnerabilities. And it's from the same website we were looking at. That's www.mentalhelp.net. That's mentalhelp.net. And this particular article is from Catherine Petricelli. She's written a whole bunch of articles here to do with abuse, and mainly child abuse, some domestic violence and whatnot. And so that's why I want to take a look at them. She's written some kind of interesting stuff here, and it's a little bit different because it's to do with the whole psychological aspect of abuse, instead of taking a look at the physical aspect of child abuse or domestic violence. She's more looking at the what it does to people as far as the psychological damage, and that's what I'm interested in looking at right now, because I just found these articles very interesting, right? There's quite a few of them. And if you want to go to this website, www.mentalhelp.net, there's all kinds of people who's doctors and therapists and whatnot, I guess, psychotherapists and whatnot, who have posted articles on here to do with abuse, and domestic violence and whatnot. So I don't know. I think there's some really good stuff on here, so I think people should check it out if you want. Catherine Petricelli, for instance, has written a lot of articles, and so that we've been covering this now for a couple of weeks, right? But I just want to take a look at a couple more articles on here, and then we'll move on from here. But she's written another article called Post-Abuse Vulnerabilities. So that's what we're going to look at this morning. And I did pop the link into the chat room, so anybody who's in the chat room can get a hold of that link and check it out. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate y'all being here. She writes, I'm just reading from the page, but I'll be adding all my stuff in there, right? She says, abuse is normal. People abused as children often grow up thinking that abuse is normal behavior that everyone experiences and par for the course. This warped perspective makes abuse victims vulnerable to perpetuating the cycle of abuse as they grow older. And those previously abused people who get involved in romantic relationships as adults may find themselves attracted to people who will abuse them. She says here, they may even believe that the abusive behaviors their partner periodically acts out are proof of passion and love. And that's, I've seen this in other people. I know for myself, I didn't take on that behavior, of thinking that abuse. I just felt like that was my life, growing up in the home that I was growing up in. I certainly didn't like the way I was being treated, and I don't know if I thought it was so much normal, to be abused, to be being abused as a child. I just think that I wasn't happy about it, and the fact that watching my family be destroyed like that, it was a little tough, But I realized that abuse was wrong, and that's the whole issue. I always knew that, but I know I've talked to people, and I've had a friend, actually, one of my friends who grew up in an abusive environment. Her mom loved her and everything, but her mom loved her boyfriends a little bit more than her children. So it really didn't matter what was going on in the home. She was paying more attention to the men in her life than her own children, right? And she was already in a domestic violence situation where my friend's dad was abusive and had sent her to the hospital and had beaten on the children and stuff. So my friend was abused as well, and she kind of took on that role that abuse was just normal. That's the way it is. When she grew up and got into her own relationships, she would get involved with these abusive guys, and ended up not marrying one, but staying with one who was so abusive and having a child with this man. And then the abuse continued on, and that's my friend. I actually detail that in my book. Actually, both of my books, The Life of Death and The Redemption, and also La Vida Juvis. I talk about her a lot because we spent quite a few years together, my friend and I. And we're both coming from bad homes, and I could see her behavior was a little bit different than mine. We were both different people, but the whole issue is I could see her with thinking that this was life, and that this is the way life was, and she was going to just deal with it. And I was thinking, no, you don't want to let yourself be abused or your kid, right? So I used to try to protect her, before, and especially before the baby came around. Then after the baby came around, I was trying to protect her and her baby, and it was just like, oh my God, yeah, she finally figured it out, but it took her a long time to figure it out. That abuse does not equal love, right? It doesn't equal passion and love. But she actually, that's kind of, I believe that's kind of what she thought, and mainly because her mother had allowed herself to be abused by men, these men that she would meet and fall in love with or whatever, and then marry. Some of them she married, some she didn't. But she watched her mother doing this, and so she just perpetuated that cycle, really, and just thought, well, that's what men do. They abuse women, and that's, she was also abusive to her boyfriend, and but the thing is that he was way more abusive to her than she was to him, I'll tell you that. It's harsh to see people do that, but it's almost, I don't know, because I never believed that abuse equals passion and love. I never did take that belief on, because because I witnessed my parents fighting. I witnessed my dad hurting my mother, raping my mother. You know what I mean? I saw my dad rape my mother in front of me. It's ridiculous. And people say, well, how do you know it was rape? Well, when somebody's fighting somebody off and trying to get away and pushing and shoving and not screaming, but because it was the middle of the night, she didn't want to wake the whole house up. But I was actually in the room, and my dad didn't know it. My mom did. My mom knew I was in the room, and she was telling him that I was on the couch, and he was like, she's sleeping, and my mom, my dad was just, my God, he's a sick man. But anyway, I knew that abuse did not equal love, right? But I've heard that, this can happen, and people, some survivors can actually take that on, thinking that abuse equals love. It's passion, and it proves their love. And I've actually read stuff about that. I've read stories about survivors who have sort of felt that way, right? So it's hard. It's very, very hard, and we have to realize that abuse is not normal and it's not love, right? She says alternatively, abuse victims may have internalized the ethic of abuse and may think that it is normal and an appropriate way to deal with others. Parents who were abused as children may find it easy to rationalize abusing their own children. For instance, quote unquote, she says, or spare the rod and spoil the child is the common refrain here. In effect, being abused as a child tends to set people up to either continue to be abused as adults or to become abusive themselves and carry on the cycle of violence with new partners and children, right? So spare the rod and spoil the child. I talk about that a lot on my shows because, that just doesn't make any sense to me because I believe I read the Bible, right? So I'm into the Bible big time. I'm a believer, and I have one show a week on here on Sundays that I do that I talk about the Bible and whatnot. I don't do a whole lot of that talking about that in my work with in my healing journey, talking about this with survivors because before I became a Christian, I would have been offended by this, and I would have not wanted to listen to anybody who was talking about the Bible and the situations of abuse, right? Because I was not a Christian, and so I don't mix the two because I know myself. Anytime any Christian said anything to me, really anything to me, I would just blow it off and I would be offended because And it wasn't because they were Christians. It was because my dad was a Christian and he was abusing us. You know, I mean, I talk a whole lot about that on my shows, but you'd have to go back and listen to all my shows. So, I mean, I'll just mention it here briefly. But, you know, our parents were not, you know, they didn't sit around reading the Bible around the house together or anything like that. But my mom, they both, you know, read the Bible and whatnot when they were younger. They both went to church and whatnot. But we never went to church. And my dad was a born-again Christian, and he used to go to church on Sundays. And every Sunday is pretty much in my home, every Sunday was just a drag. You know what I mean? Because the fights would start, and, you know, my dad would come home from church, and he would, you know, call everybody names and accuse my mom of being a whore and a harlot. And, of course, my brothers would try to stick up for my mom, and then he'd start beating on my brothers, and then I'd stick up for my brothers, then I'd get smacked around. And it was just a stupid scene, and my dad was like, all in the name of the Lord. You know, he was like, we're all heathen, and you're all going to hell. And, you know, and then by nightfall, because my dad's psychotic, right, he's mentally ill. He's schizophrenic is what his problem is, and lots of other things, but mainly schizophrenic. And he, by nightfall, he'd be thinking about killing us all, and he'd be walking around the house, I should just kill us all. You know, we're all evil, we're all from the devil. And then he'd be running down the freeway trying to kill himself, you know. You know, this is how Sundays went in my house, you know what I mean? So I really don't like Sundays. I still have a problem. Sundays actually trigger me. Some Sundays are better than others, but I still have an issue with Sundays. But my dad was a Christian, and he was a born-again Christian, and he would hurt his family. You know, he would come home, and he would hurt his family, and including his wife and all the kids, whoever was around, whoever was in the house, whatever. The whole issue is that, you know, all in the name of the Lord. I mean, in the name of God. And I was just like, how could a Christian do that? They're supposed to have love in their heart. They're supposed to, you know, and as a small child, of course, I didn't know all that stuff. But what I did know is that my dad was coming home on Sundays and kicking the crap out of my brothers, hurting my mother, and possibly hurting me if I spoke up. So, you know, a lot of times I would sit there and be quiet. But sometimes I would say something, and I'd end up in the middle of it, too. And I was really small. I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. So this went on year after year after year. So this whole thing of spare the rod and spoil the child is such garbage to me. Spare the rod and spoil the child, what that meant was, because shepherds in the Bible use the rod to guide their sheep. Well, shepherds don't beat on their sheep, because sheep, to a shepherd, that's their livelihood. And they're not going to beat on their livelihood. They actually use them for a guide. It's to guide and to direct the sheep. They don't whip on their sheep with a rod. And that's why it's so stupid for people to think that spare the rod, spoil the child has anything to do with that. The Bible did not mean that. And I read the Bible, and I've done a lot of Bible study, and people just need to learn how to interpret the Bible, because the Bible we're not talking in the same language that we are today. And so spare the rod and spoil the child really meant, if you don't use the rod to direct your child, which doesn't mean to beat on them, it means if you don't direct your children, you're going to ruin your children. Because children do need direction, right? But they do not need to be beaten on. And they do not need to be, so that saying actually has always made me very angry. And it's because people are really ignorant and don't know how to interpret, and I wouldn't bother to get the information to interpret the Bible correctly, right? So that's the problem, right? There's always a whole group of people that, for some reason, don't realize that, you know, that Bible was translated into English. It wasn't written in English, and that we have to think about these things from the minds of the people that wrote them, and that was whether it was 4,000. 3,500 BC, 2,000 BC, 1,500 BC, or 1,500 AD. You know, I mean, we got to think of that this stuff that's been written down. You have to think about it in the context of how those people spoke in those days and what they meant by it. So I don't know, spare the rod, spoil the child. That saying has always made me extremely angry, because I hear people say that all the time, and it's like, oh yeah, right, okay. Sure. It's just an excuse for people to be able to beat on their children, right? And feel justified about doing it. And they're so ignorant, because they don't realize that doesn't do anything. It just sets kids up to either hit or to have a lot of shame. You know what I mean? So it's like, if parents hitting their children, what does that do? My mom hit me and taught me how to hit other people. My mom was hitting me all the time, and that's why I just learned from her that that's what you do when you want something done. When you want to control the situation, you hit somebody. Or if you're mad, hey, give them a good smack, right? So because my mom was always slapping me in the face, and I mean, all the time. She was a horrible woman. You know what I mean? I can't say anything else about her really. I know that there's other family members that I have. There's only a few of us left living, right? But the few that are living, don't like me talking about this stuff because they loved her. Oh, Mom, she used to make cookies. It's like, yeah, Mom used to kick my ass. And you all used to stand around and do absolutely nothing about it. So I don't want to hear it. I have a real problem with that. But the thing is, she taught me how to hit people. Because that's what I would do to my friends. As soon as something would happen, they would break my toy, or even if it was an accident, it wouldn't matter. I'd be mad, and of course I'd hit them. And I mean, I wouldn't just hit them like a little kid might hit somebody. That's what my mom was doing to me. So I would backhand them. I would attack them, And my mom, of course, would see this, or the kids. If we were at my house playing, usually the kids weren't actually allowed over my house, but there were a few that actually used to come over. And in particular, friends of my parents actually had a couple of girls, and this one girl was at the house and was had actually broke one of my toys on purpose. So I mean, I slapped her a good one. Well, she was kind of not crying, but she was sort of upset by it. My mom actually saw what was going on and came over and of course beat on me because she saw me hitting that girl. So but in my mind I was thinking, okay, you're the one that showed me how to do this, and now I'm paying the price for it. Right. So all hitting children does really is show them that whenever they don't like something, hey, pull out the belt, pull out the fist, pull out the backhand, pull out the wooden rolling pin. Hey, why not? Let's have a field day and beat on everybody. Whatever we don't like, we'll beat on. That's what that teaches a child. So it's very important to remember that, if you're going to use, that kind of discipline, you're not going to get very far with your children because it doesn't do anything anyway. You can beat on your children all you want, but it just teaches them how to misbehave and how to beat on other kids, right? And how to beat on their wives and children when they get older. That's all it teaches. You got to think about it. Children are sponges, and they learn whatever their parents are showing them and teaching them. That's what they're going to learn. It's better that parents actually tell the kids to take a time out and then do something else. You know what I mean? That's going to make some sort of an impact on them instead of just beating on them, right? Because it doesn't seem to do any good. So that whole saying has always bothered me. Spare the rod and spoil the child. That's such BS. You know what I mean? People are so stupid. I just can't believe people would not get the education and realize what that meant, right? But so many people would say, "Oh no, that's not what it meant." It's like, no. Well, I know because I do the studies. I'm willing to put the time in to study stuff, right? So a lot of people just don't want to read and they don't want to get an education. And the whole issue is that, if you don't read, you don't check it out, then you're just going to be believing something that's not true. And so it's just important people do get the information. So she says here, in effect, being abused as a child tends to set people up to either continue to be abused as adults or to become abusive people themselves and carry on the cycle of violence with new partners and children. I mean, this is, it can happen. It's not like every person who's ever been abused will go on to be abusive people themselves. Not everybody. Not everybody who's been abused will take the cycle of violence on, and not everyone will hurt their children. I know lots of survivors who have children who are the best parents because they themselves don't want their children to go through what they did. So they are really careful about everything they do, and they love their children because they themselves were not loved as children. And they want to create that nurturing environment for their children because that's what they missed out on, and they know how serious that is, And so, I mean, it's awesome to see that, right? People breaking the cycle. I love it. I didn't have my child. The only baby that I was going to have died halfway through my pregnancy in a miscarriage, so I never had any children. But I'd like to think that I would have broke the cycle. I mean, I really do. I would like to think that I would have broke the cycle. I know in my mind now. I mean, just myself, I broke the cycle. But I mean, if I had children, I know I'd like to think that I would have, right? Because it's so important. But not everybody will go on to abuse their children who have been abused. Now, both my parents were abused. They grew up in abusive homes. My mom was abused horrifically by her mother. My grandmother was a horrible woman. And so, but my parents were born in 1920s. And my parents were born in, my dad was born in 23. My mom was born in 27. And so, they grew up in an era where, the parents, especially in Nova Scotia on a farm in the hills, in the backwoods, they were coming from people who had really very little education and believed that that's how you treated kids, right? That's how you treated your children back in 1920, 1930, 1935. I mean, you beat on your children, right? That's what they did. And so, and especially my grandmother, she was a horrible woman. She actually killed one of her own sons and my uncle, she was responsible for his death, really. Did she ever get brought up on charges? No, they just buried him, and she was allowed to continue to abuse other kids and orphans and her own children. She was a horrible woman, and and my mom grew up with her, so you can imagine, like, that's my mom. My mom never got any help, so then my mother was this horrible woman, who of course was suffering because she had grown up under this horrible woman, and then married this man who was abusive. So my mom, but does it give her an excuse to abuse? No. So, like, do I say, oh, well, my mom was just abused, and she had this horrible life, and that's why she treated me the way she was, and it's okay? No, it's not okay. What she did to me was absolutely horrible, and what she did to my other siblings as well, but mainly me. And, can we excuse that away because she was abused? No, we can't. It's the same with my dad. He grew up in a strange situation. I don't even know what the deal is with that family, but as you can tell, I'm not close with them. But they moved away. My parents moved, to 3,500 miles away from their family. Right? They moved from Nova Scotia to New Mexico, right, down in the States. But this was out years. This was like back in 1960. And my dad was in the Department of Transport up here in the Canadian military, which was a branch of the military up here in Canada, World War II. So they were on bases and they were around, and they were a military family, right? So after he got out of the DOT, he decided he needed to move to New Mexico, right? But they just didn't want to go back to Nova Scotia, and I have a big feeling about that. I think they were trying to get away as far away from their past as they could, but they were trying to run from their past, like both of my parents. And then they were already abusive towards each other, right? Their whole entire marriage. So, you can't outrun this stuff. I actually did the same thing. I mean, I moved from New Mexico to Canada trying to on the run, finally just running, right? And thinking, hey, I'll be able to escape this, I'll be able to get a new life, and this stuff just followed me right along where I was going, you know what I mean? So I got up here, and then I had a real hard time because all of a sudden I was away from my abusers, and it just hit me what I had been through and what they had done to me, and I was in a rage, and especially when my mom passed away a year later, right? So absolutely horrible what happens to people, but not everyone who's been abused will go on to abuse other people or their children, right? Or become involved in abusive relationships. Like me, I absolutely refuse to allow someone to abuse me. And when I got, in all of my relationships, that's why I'm very leery about relationships, especially in an intimate partner like boyfriend, girlfriend, I'm interested in men. So any relationships that I've had with a guy, I'm very leery of it, you know what I mean? Because it's like, okay, I don't really trust men because of my dad and my brother, right? So I don't really trust men, and I think about how they treated, how my dad treated my mom and how he treated us, and then I think, so I'm not about to let somebody else abuse me, you know what I mean? And so I have a hard time in relationships because as soon as somebody even thinks they're going to do something rude to me, I'm like, buddy, you're not going to do that, you know what I mean, because you're not going to mistreat me in any way. And of course, then they're thinking, well, I wasn't doing anything. I'm like, yes, you are, because I'm watching for abuse here, because they know my situation. My sweetheart, who I'm with 15 years now, he's terminally ill and everything. It's really quite sad, but we're still together and we're still good friends. And when we first got together, he kind of knew what had happened to me. I told him a little bit, but he didn't know the extent. And we actually broke up for a year, and I took a year off because I needed to think about, I had lost the baby, and I needed to take some time and think about what I was doing and really grieve the loss of my mother as well and my baby, because they both died within 3 months of each other. So it was harsh. But I made I sat down and I thought clearly for that year that I was not going to let anybody else ever abuse me ever again. You know what I mean? And I was serious about it. Like, I made a deal with myself. I said, you cannot allow people to come into your life and just mistreat you again. You spent your whole life just being mistreated by these two horrible people who were supposed to be your parents, and now what, you're going to allow somebody else in your life to hurt you? I made a deal with myself that I would not allow somebody else to do that. So I hope other people will too. Just, no one deserves to be abused, right? So, make sure that you're not. If you are in a situation where you are being abused, you got to get yourself some help. You know what I mean? Do whatever you can to get yourself some help. because it's not, you don't deserve it. It's not right, and people really have no right to treat other people this way. They really have no right to abuse another person. It's something that people do. It's a choice they make. And people say, "Well, they love me." It's like, no, well, really, do they? You know what I mean? Like my dad, he used to tell my mom the most horrific things and hurt her. You know what I mean? Every day he was trying to tear her life down. And it's like, she was doing the same thing to him actually. So she was always trying to tear his life down too. They were trying to destroy each other all the time. And you know, after she died, then my dad started saying stuff like, "I just loved your mother." And I'd be like, "You've got to be kidding me. You're not going to sit here and pull this crap, after all the years of abuse that you put that woman through, that I was a witness to, and I was actually trying to break you two up and ended up getting hurt from, that you're going to sit here and tell me that you love that woman and that you always did, and you never said it while she was alive?" I mean, it's like, oh my God, you know what I mean? But some people, honest to God, they will allow someone to abuse them because they think, "Oh, but they love me." It's like, no, if they truly loved you, they would not be doing that, because abuse is a choice. And everybody needs to get a really good, clear picture of the fact that abusers do what they do because they want to. And they will always make an excuse and say, "Oh, I didn't mean to hurt you. I won't do it again. I promise." And all this other garbage and BS that is complete BS. And, you need to know that abusers abuse because they are making a clear choice, and it's because they want to. My parents, every time they decided to hit me and hurt me, they made a clear decision. My mom, when she was beating on me, she knew what she was doing, and she was doing it on purpose. She wanted to hurt me, right? So I don't sit there and say, "Oh, Mom, she didn't know what she was doing. She just got carried away." And, my mom used to go into a rage and kick the crap out of me, and I'm talking serious physical abuse. And, physical violence. It's like, oh, my God. You know what I mean? And what I'm supposed to believe, that it's because she loved me. My mom hated my guts, you know what I mean? And we got to be really honest with ourselves here, you know what I mean? And if we're going to ever have a healthy relationship ever with anyone as survivors, then we have to realize what abuse is, first of all, and what it's not, right? And abuse is not normal, and it's not right. So that's what I like about this article here. I hope you will go check the rest of this out. So, don't allow anyone to abuse you, and if they are, then you need to do something to get yourself to a better place. Because no one has the right to abuse anyone, and I don't care who it is. And no one deserves to be abused. I don't care who it is. Abuse is a choice, and people make the decision to abuse people. And, it's not right, right? It's not right, and it's not normal. And it's not how life should be, right? So if you're in that situation, make sure you get yourself some help. I'll be back around here tomorrow morning, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m., one child abuse survivor to another. We'll take another look at the rest of this article. And, yeah, if you need something, I'll be around today. I'll probably be around. You can get a hold of me on Facebook or here on Blog Talk Radio if you need some information. I've got tons and tons of resources and info if you're interested. Otherwise, just take good care of yourself, man. You know what I mean? Like, we certainly didn't deserve that. And we have to ultimately be the ones who are responsible for getting help, really. I mean, it's like, who's going to do it for you? Like, nobody probably. I was waiting for somebody to do something for me, you know what I mean, my whole adult life, until the age of 41, and I realized, oh my God, I'm gonna have to do this myself. I thought by some miracle somebody would be able to take away my pain. You know what I mean? And it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to do this myself. And that was a big wake up call. And I'm glad that I figured it out, because then I started getting into reading all this, the information that I've been reading, getting into survivor information, and I started to realize, oh my God, it is my responsibility. I'm the adult here. And my parents no longer have any control over my life, and I'm not in an abusive relationship, and yet I'm dealing with all this garbage that was put on me as a child. So, hey, I'm the one that's going to have to be responsible for this. There's no way that my parents could ever make up for this. Even if they were both alive and they both could sit in the same room, they would still say that I deserved what I got. And my brother, who sexually abused me, would probably say the same thing too. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, abusive people, they don't usually change. You know what I mean? So it's like, we don't have to take that on. I was talking about this before with a couple of shows that I did. I'm actually going overtime here in just a minute, but I was talking about this before, that looking at John Bradshaw's information. John Bradshaw has awesome information to deal with, like, the shame-rage connection and whatnot. Shame-rage connection was just very interesting for me. We spent weeks on it. That's a while back. I mean, you have to go back to, like, I don't know, September or something to listen to all the shows, right? But anyway, or August maybe even. But anyway, that was some awesome information and really, really good stuff, especially for somebody like me who had a lot of shame and a lot of rage. And I didn't even know I had shame. I knew I had rage, but I didn't even know what shame was. I just thought it was kind of like, well, when you say shame on you or shame on me, right? But I didn't realize I was carrying around shame, right? So, but I kind of thought about it as I was reading that John Bradshaw stuff, that I had this necklace put around my neck by my parents, and it was full of all kinds of garbage, man. Every kind of hateful, evil thing was on this necklace from my parents, And they put that necklace on me, and I thought, I don't have to wear that thing. I don't have to wear that necklace anymore. I took it off, and I threw it away. I said, no, that necklace does not belong to me. It was put on me by two people who had a lot of problems. And who were, who did the wrong thing. And they never should have treated their children like that, especially me. I mean, I may as well say it because my mom used me as a punching bag for years. And, my dad as well. But they abused all their kids. I mean, I'm not the only one. So sadly enough, it's like they put that necklace on me, and I thought, oh my God, do I have to carry this stupid necklace around for the rest of my life with all of this garbage on it from my parents? I thought, no, I don't. I can throw that away and I can get my own necklace. And, that's what I've done basically, changed the way that I felt about things and changed the way that I felt about what is mine and what's not. And that shame does not belong to me. It belongs to my parents, and it belongs to my brother. It belongs to my abusers, right? So I don't have to carry that shame anymore. And so that took a load off like you wouldn't believe. I mean, when I finally realized that I didn't have to carry that it wasn't mine, and I threw it away, I was like, oh, thank God. That thing was heavy. I mean, I'm talking, I'd been carrying it for years, and it was heavy. It was like, whoa. So, we really ultimately are responsible for our healing journey. And, if you've been abused as a child or even a domestic violence situation, really it's ultimately up to you if you want to have a good life. No one else is going to be able to do it for you. And even the psychotherapists and therapists, they can't even do it for you. They guide you through your healing journey is what they do. And they use tools and things to help you do it. But ultimately it is up to us. So whether you're just doing self-help or whatever you do, but make sure that you reach out and you get some help, right? Don't suffer in sadness and silence, and don't allow this to be the be-all and end-all of your life, that you're just going to suffer forever. That's what my mom did. And my mom died a very miserable, sad woman because she had been abused her whole life and really hated her family, hated her children, hated her life. And I thought, how could you hate your children, There was like 7 of us. There were 7 children, and I thought, my God, how could you hate? I look at our pictures, and I think, how could you hate your children? You know what I mean? Like, we all loved her so much. And so, you know what? She died a sad, poor woman because she could not have love in her heart. She did not want, she didn't know that she could get help, even though the courts ordered them to get help, like 20-something years before she died. Well, okay, I want to say 30 because my mom was 38 when I was born. So when she was 40 years old, she was told to go. Both my parents were brought up on abuse charges when they were 40 years old. They were brought up on child abuse charges. So that's the whole issue. Yeah, they had been abusing their kids for years, but they finally got busted and got caught, right? Which, thank God, I'm glad they did. Thing is nothing changed, you know what I mean? The abuse just continued on because the social workers were coming around for a while, and then we moved out of the country is what we did, and then we moved back to the States, and we were out of sight, out of mind, right? So, but my parents, they just didn't want to get any help, and it's like they didn't want any real help, and that's proof to me that as survivors, we are ultimately responsible for our own mental health. You know what I mean? If we're having problems, then we need to get help. We can't expect somebody else to do it for us, right? We need to do it. So whatever you do, make sure you do reach out and you get some help, right? Even if it's just calling a crisis line, just having somebody to talk to, right? Just make sure that you don't suffer alone in silence. It's so sad. I know I've been there, and 2 of my brothers killed themselves. And I mean, I was really not suicidal. I had suicidal thoughts, and I used to plan my suicides until the age of 41. So I'm just saying, that's no longer an option for me. You know what I mean? I'm sticking it out, and I hope you will too. I really do. Because I wish my brothers were still here and were sticking it out, because my brothers let my parents win. My parents won that fight, because my parents really used to curse us and say that they wish we were all dead. And then my dad would threaten to kill us, and, they're talking a lot of psychological damage too, as well as emotional damage, and not only just physical damage. just every kind of damage you can think of. So it's like my brothers killed themselves, and I wish that they were still here, and I wish that they would have been able to see this for themselves, that it was ultimately up to them to want to heal from this, right? And so it's very, very sad. So I hope you guys will do that. Stick around and give every day a chance. You know what I mean? Because there's always going to be some bad days, but we can look forward to the good days. And there's for me now a lot more good days than there were a long time ago, let me tell you that. So I'm in a lot better place now than I ever was. So I hope that people will see that and hold on, and just make sure that you do get some help. So we'll talk to you all real soon. Have a great day. Talk to you later, and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.